Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Have you ever received a package that did not contain what you were expecting? Well, watch out for today's second story. In fact, watch out for the third story too, because both those stories are kind of bonkers in a very scary way, both featuring mysterious and apparently violent creatures. So sit back and enjoy your, well, the last thing I had was a chocolate cream cold brew from Starbucks, so if you haven't had one of those, I definitely recommend. Sit back and enjoy your chocolate cream cold brews from Starbucks, my friends, because these are tales from the break room. By the way, have you ever wanted a Darkness Prevails plushie? Well, there's only 100 in existence, and if you want one, all you gotta do is go to Amazon.com and search for my new and upcoming book, Creepy Campfire Stories by Darkness Prevails. Pre-order it and verify the pre-order with the link in the description. If you're one of the first pre-order verifications, you'll get one of our plushies. They start shipping after the book releases on July 8th, 2025. And the book itself is a gorgeous hardcover book full of the most terrifying campfire stories to share with friends. Thank you. Now let's begin, shall we? I don't think that was poultry. From Christian H. The open road is something few people can experience fully. It's freeing, knowing that if you follow the asphalt and yellow paint, you'll end up at another bastion of human existence. I'm not talking about driving a car from home to work. I mean driving for a living, spending more time at the wheel than at home. You're alone, where the only sound is the diesel engine roaring ahead, and if you're lucky, a radio station playing the same 10 songs. I'm sure the guys driving now have a better way to keep their mind occupied, but we didn't have that in the 80s. You really got familiar with yourself in a way few people nowadays can understand. You're not here to be lectured about the way I think things should be, though. It's not my place. I'm here because something happened on one of my drives I can't explain. At least, not in any logical way. I worked as a trucker for 10 years with different companies, moving all things from animals, machinery, and refined metals. At the time of this incident, I worked for one of the biggest producers of chicken in the United States. My job was strictly transport. I'd move live chickens from farm to plant, or processed meats to dispensaries. It paid well, but kept me away from the family a lot more than I liked. The wife had wanted me to get a more local job for years, but the pay cut was hard to take. The day all this started, I had just come back from a 4-day drive delivering chicken byproducts to a disposal site. My wife had voiced her want for attention, so I was in a hurry to get home. I had just pulled up to the stop sign leaving work when I saw my boss. I'll call him Bill, and you can refer to me as Brad. He ran out the front doors to catch me. The temptation to sling rock his way was palpable. He had forced the last job on me, and I wanted to go home. But instead of causing a scene, I parked my truck as he made his way to my driver's side window. While he stood watching me roll down the window, I knocked some ash from my cigarette onto his boots. He looked annoyed at that, but started. "Thank God I caught you, Brad. You better thank me for not driving off and leaving you dry. Who do you think you are, huh? It's been weeks since I saw my wife and you come running out here trying to drag me back onto the road," I said, shoving my finger in his face. "How do you know I was going to ask you to pick up a load? What if you had forgotten something?" he said with a nervous smile. I stared at him for a long minute, which wiped the smile off his face. "Look, Brad, Mitchie called again. I've tried everything, but he's not picking up. I've got a very important load my boss wants moved as soon as possible." I clicked my tongue before turning the ignition. "Wait, there's a big bonus on this one. $1,000 for whoever takes it. Straight out of the boss's pocket too, not taxed, all cash." Well, that would do wonders for us, I thought. We had an okay life, but things could always be a bit better. I took my hand off the gear shift. "Dang it, Bill. Where to? And you'd better call Cindy. Tell her why I won't be home tonight," I said, thumping the butt on the gravel. His brow loosened and a smile crept across his lips. "It's at one of our old warehouses. We stopped stocking it 4 years back. Now we just store old equipment there. It's a 3-day drive from here." Oh, Jesus. "Well, let's get it loaded. I'd like to get this done," I said. My rig was pretty tacky, I'm embarrassed to say. It was jet black with flames rolling down the back. Thinking back, it was dang ugly, and it turned heads in the wrong way. You know, a lot of eye rolls and scoffs. Some of the loaders were getting the trailer ready. It was an enclosed trailer we called a dry van. They carried a large metal box on a forklift. It had small holes along the sides and the top. The holes were just big enough to fit your pinky through. Kinda like what you would carry a new pet home in. "The heck you got me hauling? I've never carried something like that before," I said. "Can't tell you that. Don't worry, it's nothing illegal," he said. Whatever it was, it made Bill sweat though. He stood a good 20 feet from that trailer. I've moved chickens, but they were always in flimsy wire cages. This thing was made of thick metal painted matte black. It was heavy too. The forks creaked as it was lifted into the trailer. Some of the idle workers backed away. It was loaded onto the trailer with a substantial thud. "When you get to the warehouse, there'll be a man waiting for you. All you gotta do is pull the trailer around back, unhook, and drive off. He'll do the rest," he said. "You want me to leave the trailer?" "Yes, don't worry about it. I'll get someone to pick it up later," he said. But before I could get away, he grabbed me by the arm with unusual force and pulled me close. "One last thing, Brad. Don't open up that trailer. Whatever you think you hear in there, you don't open it. Got it?" he said. I would have laughed at him, but something in his tone, the way he looked at me, stifled it in my throat. I realized Bill wasn't happy about this either. His mention of noises didn't fill me with confidence either. The first night was rough. When I finally left for the warehouse, I'd been on the road all day and wasn't ready for another long drive. Staying at the office was an option, but this seemed important, so I drove for a few hours before quitting near a local stop. It was familiar to me, a little gas station just outside of home base. I checked to make sure my truck was secured, locked up, and I went in to shower. It was nice to wash off the day before resting. The plan was to be on the road again by 8 a.m., so no time was wasted on the shower. While walking by the trailer, I noticed a strange clicking sound coming from inside. It was quiet, and at first, it sounded like the truck. Listening through, it wasn't the normal odd sounds it makes after a long drive. It sounded like someone clicking their tongue, but with a hefty bass to it. I put my hand on the trailer. The sound reverberated off the metal walls. No one had gotten in. Every lock was still secure, and no other vehicle was around. It was weird, but I blew it off. There wasn't much time to care anyway. Whatever the clicking was, it stopped sometime during the night. Before leaving, I debated calling Bill, but he told me the noises were nothing, so he wouldn't be giving me an answer. Still, I felt he should know, so I gave the payphone a ring. He didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. "Hey, Bill, whatever y'all got me moving is making a weird sound. If this thing's a bomb or something, I think it's a dud. Things stopped clicking last night and been real quiet since. I'll call you if something else happens. You better pick up next time. Brad." I hung the phone back up and hit the road. I drove another 12 hours through the mountainous foothills of the Appalachians. The highways don't run as smooth there. You'll go up and over larger hills and drive along the mountain. For an inexperienced driver, it'd be intimidating. It was for my first few drives. At this point, though, I had driven over them close to 100 times, so my nerves were under control. It was my 9th hour of the drive and the road was small. 2 cars could barely pass by one another. Luckily, it had been empty until this point. A turn came up, and as I prepared for it, a black 1970s Impala came flying around the corner on the wrong side of the road. With little time for a reaction, I slammed my brakes and laid on the horn, hoping to God the person would change lanes. Smoke billowed from the wheels as the smell of burnt rubber filled my cab. The ear-scraping sound of the tires was accompanied by a loud squelch of metal which came from inside the trailer. The rig came to a stop just as the Impala switched lanes. It barely missed the rear end of my trailer as it blew past me down the road. "Freaking moron," I said, hanging out my driver's window. I tried to scream more profanities, but the smoke from my brakes and tires forced a cough. The truck wasn't damaged, though it was close to coming off the edge. The concerning thing was the clicking sound. It was back, and with more rapidity than earlier. I got out to check the trailer. The thing rumbled with each click. A new large dent now stuck out from the side. It had a point to it, like something large and sharp had slammed into the side. "I'm gonna beat the brakes off you, Bill, next time I see you," I said, under my breath. The veins in my head were pumping fast and I was hot. I'd get this way sometimes, like a kettle on a red-hot stove spewing steam through the air, waiting for relief. I say this so you know I wasn't thinking straight when I yanked the keys out of the ignition and grabbed my flashlight from under the seat. I made my way to the back, fumbling with the keys. I cursed Bill and the big boss for forcing this job on me. I found the right key and shoved it into the lock that held the latch and the 2 large doors. The lock opened with a satisfying snap. I opened the door, leaving the keys hanging from the lock. As they opened, the whole trailer fell silent, clicking ceasing. The light from my flashlight revealed the large metal crate. It was toppled onto its side. The lock was still secured, but the top had been ripped open from the inside. Large speckled feathers lay around the box. I wouldn't say they were chicken, though, because they were the size of my forearm. The silence from inside the trailer calmed my blood, but the sight of the toppled crate is what snapped me out of my anger. I suddenly felt this was a terrible mistake, especially when I'd looked towards the darkened part of the trailer. 4 eyes stared back at me. The bottom 2 were green like algae baked in a dried-up lake. The top 2 were a deep blue, like the last layer of ocean before total darkness. As I stared back, the clicking began again. It was slower than before, and I felt it echoing through my chest. Its pupils dilated as it lowered towards the ground. I was unable to move the light onto the creature. Whatever it was deserved to stay in the dark. Its rhythmic noise increased in speed as it moved closer towards me. Death watched me. If I remained, I would die. I knew that. Its pupils shrunk, forming tiny black holes at the center of its eyes. It charged forward with heavy footsteps, rocking the ground with its apparent weight. With a pounding heart, I slammed the door and threw the lock over the latch. I went to snap it shut, but the thing hit the door, throwing me off the back. I landed on my side hard, crushing my collarbone. It kept slamming into the door, causing dents to form. The latch rattled, threatening to open. I jumped up, and with a bit of pain I snapped the lock shut. It rammed into the doors a few more times before finally stopping. The trailer rocked with its movement as the sound slowly subsided. Making my way to the driver's side door with shaking hands, I drove away. The whole ride was spent 20 miles above the speed limit. It took another 2 hours before the next stop came into view. I wasted no time calling Bill. I phoned his personal phone this time. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, but after calling twice, he finally picked up.
"Bill Werner speaking, who?"
He said, yawning. "Bill, what the heck do you have me moving? That thing nearly ripped my head off," I said. "Brad? Wait, please don't tell me you opened the back." "You're dang right I did. Some stupid kid came flying on the wrong side of the road and nearly killed us both. So I went to check the load like we're supposed to, Bill. I saw that the crate was turned over and its lid had been ripped off." "Christ, Brad, you have to get to the warehouse now. I need to call the handler. He's going to need backup," he said, losing all his tiredness at once. "Handler? What are you talking about?" "Brad, be quiet. Do your job and get back home. What's important right now is that you get to that warehouse. She's not going to stay passive for long," he said, with an unsatisfying click following his words. I slammed the phone into its place, shooting pain up my shoulder. Sucks being the lowest man on the totem pole. You're never told anything. I hoped to get some rest, but that wasn't going to happen apparently. So I went inside the truck stop, grabbed some caffeine pills. With a few of them shoved into my mouth, a cigarette in my lips, and the radio cranked all the way up, I started the engine. That was one of the longest drives of my life. After I left the stop, I didn't take my foot off the pedal until I reached the warehouse. A few times I blew past a smoky, and I surely thought I'd get pulled over, but they didn't even flash their lights. It was strange since it really could have cost me my job, but I guess Bill pulled some strings to make this happen quickly. The warehouse was completely dark when I pulled up. There were no other buildings nearby, large pines being its only neighbors. The gate was open, but I could tell all the windows and doors had locks. A few no trespassing signs hung on the fencing. A bunch of decommissioned trailers with the company logo sat in the parking lot, along with 3 black sedans. When I pulled around back, there was a group of men sitting around waiting. All 4 of them wore thick Kevlar jackets and padding. 3 of them had large brown gun cases, and when I pulled up, they began to unlatch them. I stepped out and began to unhook the trailer. When finished, one of the guys walked over to me. He was dressed like the others, but his clothes under the armor signified he was in a different pay bracket. I was about to speak when he reached into his pocket and pulled out a large wad of cash. It was way more than 1,000, that's for sure. "For your troubles. Thanks for getting it here quickly. Best not talk about this, got it?" he said. As much as I wanted answers, the cash was more tempting. Plus, I had a good idea what would happen if I said no. "Got it," I said, with a bit too much poison behind my words. I grabbed the money from him and hopped in the truck. "Good man. Now go home to your wife and son," he said. With that threat, I left. As I was leaving, loud and rapid gunfire came from the warehouse. The sounds flowed through the trees as I drove until suddenly it all stopped, leaving only the sound of my engine to accompany me home. I quit my job that day, called Bill on a payphone and told him so. He seemed to understand, even said he'd be a reference for me. It was $5,000 they gave me that night. Back then, that was a good bit of money for a single 2-day job. I still don't know what that was, or why I had to transport it. I've looked on other sites, but no one has claimed to have done anything similar. If the appearance of the thing sounds familiar to you, or the sounds it made, or any other part of my story, let me know, so I can stay far, far away from the next one. Phantom and Chains, Aisle 3, from Wolfie. I'm not a convinced believer in the paranormal, even with some of the things I've seen and experienced. I try to stay on the rational side of things, as I know people's imaginations can run away with them. It makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If you're in a cave for shelter, you want to be wary that something big and scary could be in the shadows. but it makes it harder when you know that shadow on the wall is just the coat over the chair in front of the window, and not some sleep demon waiting for you to drift off. That being said, I've seen some things I just can't explain, and this seems like the right place for them. As an aside, I've worked in a few different jobs, and while I'm not saying things follow me, I live very near to one of, if not the most, haunted city per ghost per capita, and that does have a passive effect on your rationale. The first thing that springs to mind comes from days working retail. I spent far too long taking crap from the public before I got out of there. As anyone who works there can tell you, it's not a pleasant atmosphere. I worked a lot of early setup and late close shifts, sometimes back to back, and I can tell you that store was freaky at times. This involved a phantom member of staff. I'd worked in the store for about a couple of years before I saw them the first time, though I'd heard the stories before it happened to me. There was a plaque in our loading area for a staff member who had died on the premises, though the reason varied depending on who you asked. Usually it was a tragic loading accident, but a few people claimed it was suicide by a few differing methods. And it was one of the first things new guys working the stock to shop floor would ask about. This was usually what people put the event up to, but I never felt satisfied with this answer. The first time I saw them, I was working a late shift with one other person in the customer cafe area. This wasn't really allowed, as we served food until unreasonably late, and had fryers and hot plates on the go all the time, so the potential for injury was increased the lower the number of staff there was. And with breaks included, you were often left on your own having to serve, cook, and take out food, all the while dealing with the gracious general public. I chased my colleague, S, away for their break, as S had been working for around 6 hours without one, and I prepared myself mentally for any issues that were likely to come up. The store was generally quiet, so I got to some cleaning out front to get ahead of the close, and so I'd be around if a customer showed up. The layout of the checkout area was a funky L shape with a weird angle instead of the usual right angle where the two straight edges meet, with the prep and cooking area behind 2 doors about 3 feet apart, one for entry and one for exit. Both doors have small windows in them, but that's the only viewpoint into the cooking area. Hence, lone or low working numbers were prohibited. If you hurt yourself, no one could really see, and it would be a long time before someone came to do a welfare check. Much more likely a line of customers would build up over time, and a manager would be harassed into finding out what was going on. I was cleaning the front of the register area. You'd be surprised how messy customers are, and how few will tell you if they or their children have spilled on the front of the counter. I popped my head up just above the counter, bringing me eye level with the bottom of the door window. Through it, I saw a person looking at me, who turned to their left and walked out of my view. Thinking it was my colleague, I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I took off my apron as I spun through the door, pushing it open with my back. This was the door on my right, which would be the in door, and the direction the person had walked in, and had begun talking to my colleague. "Hey, yes, you should have let me know you were back already. I'd have run a coffee up for us before I left." I stopped dead there, as I could see no one in the kitchen. The hair began to stand up on my neck, but there's enough counters to hide behind, so I thought maybe S was messing with me. I popped my head back out the in door, just to make sure they hadn't come out as I'd run in, but there was no one in sight. I walked back into the kitchen, saying, "Hey man, don't mess with me. I need to take 5 too, you know." I checked behind all the counters, but there was no one there. Turning a full circle to just take the room in, I could swear I saw a shadow on the far wall, well away from any shadow the lights in the ceiling could cast for me, and I swear that usually hot room dropped a few degrees. I froze on the spot, not moving, not knowing if it was a trick of the light or I was seeing a person-sized and shaped shadow moving across the wall. It seemed to get thicker, more three-dimensional, more real, as it worked its way towards the fire escape on the far wall. Just as I was convinced I was losing my mind, S walked in, halfway through some apology to a customer outside. "Hey, Wolfie, there's a customer who says he saw you walk in here 10 minutes ago." She then trailed off as she saw the look on my face, a confused and worried look. "Are you all right?" she asked. I don't think I answered her. I just took off my hat, picked up my fleece jacket, and left for my break. I just wanted to put some distance between me and whatever that was that happened to me. I did see this figure a few more times in my years at the store, but I still didn't have the same chilling fear effect on any other occasion. And I still don't know what it was, but every time I shop in that store, I stay away from the cafe area, just in case it comes to say hello. Another incident that happened to me a few times happened in the changing room area for staff. There were lockers and hangers for coats and outside clothing, and in between the hangers were chains for some reason. Oftentimes you'd be standing in the changing rooms on your own at the start or end of a shift, and the chains would begin to swing on their own. Slowly at first, then build up momentum until you could hear them clinking together. The gents area was a small, open, square room with the lockers on the walls, so there was no way it was another person. And before you cry air conditioner, I'm from the UK. We only have that in very few places, and retail staff areas are not one of those. Honestly, every time it happened to me, it felt like the temperature dropped, and I got the feeling that someone was playing with the chains, like they were stroking them rather than pushing or throwing them around. Believe me, when you finally notice that noise and find the chains swaying, you remove yourself very quickly from the room and just leave them to do their thing. The Forest Road, from Wisdom Tooth. The job I had can be bloody hard. From dawn until nightfall, wiggling through rough terrain, setting markers and checking measurements needed for road construction. I'm a road surveyor, you see. I always come home dirty and wet and especially tired. Each road has its own unique challenges, rocky ground or marshy soil or steep inclines, which ultimately means that every job can be quite different, making my work more complicated. During the jobs, I would be accompanied by my crew. The crew consisted of me and 5 other men. The most experienced person there was Old Tom. Had enough experience for a lifetime with the company. He knew every little trick there was. He had a long white beard and a big scar across his face. One time, during one of his jobs a long time ago, Old Tom was in charge of removing trees from the place where roads would be built. As they were cutting down some trees, one of them began to fall in the wrong direction, directly at the crew. That tree killed 2 people that day, and injured Old Tom pretty well. "Maybe my face looks like a bird did its business on it, but at least I'm alive," he would say during his many tellings of the story. The other men were Jonathan, Samuel, Lawrence, and Dean, with Dean and Lawrence being in charge. Dean was what we like to call the joker of the group, constantly cracking jokes of some sort. Many were lame, but there were some good ones thrown in there too. On the other hand, Jonathan was a calm man who didn't talk much. The guy was an introvert, but he was a good man with a passion for collecting rare items. Lawrence was a huge nerd who told us a new fun fact every morning while we drank coffee. And Samuel was the grumpy guy who always had some complaints about everything. Naturally, we called him Mr. Grumpy. We all got along pretty well, though. It was a pleasure working with the dudes. However, everything took a turn for the worse last year. Around summertime, I was 3 weeks away from vacation, and could not wait to get away from my job and recharge my batteries. But before I could do that, I had one more job to finish up. We were tasked with charting a path through an old infamous forest, located on the outskirts of a small town. I'll refer to it as Greenwell. People were terrified of these woods and would avoid them at all costs. Allegedly, the forest near Greenwell was haunted. Some people talked about ghosts or even witches being out there, but strangely enough, most of the local stories were about werewolves. People claimed to see shadows flitting between the trees and hearing howls that would echo at night. But the actual scary part was the reality of the place, which was that people have disappeared going through those woods. Enough to be less of a coincidence, in my opinion. Naturally, my team and I were skeptical of all that, but a job was a job, and this one paid almost double because many companies refused to take it. On our first day, we decided to start at dawn. Our plan was to survey the land and plan the road's path, marking trees and any major obstacles that needed to be removed in order to make space for the road. The forest was dense, consisting mostly of old oaks and thick underbrush. The sun barely shone through the canopy, and because of that, it was very chilly in there, and chilling. The forest was wet and there was mud all over, but luckily we were prepared and dressed up properly. We could hear the sounds of the bugs and different animals all around, but nothing out of the ordinary so far. Probably thanks to the stories we'd been told, we were kind of on edge. I would often get chills on my body and that strange feeling of being watched. Dean would try to joke and banter to keep our spirits up. "Come on, ladies, work calls," he would say. As we continued our work, strange things started to happen. It began when I saw in the corner of my eye a very quick shadow moving amongst the trees. I didn't want to bother or scare the crew, so I didn't mention it, because it could be anything. But moments later, Jonathan spoke up, saying, "Feels like we're being watched," rubbing his neck. "Yeah, I think I saw something just now too," I added. "Just a deer," Samuel said. The day after that, we started by cutting down the trees. Old Tom was in charge of the truck and pulling the trees out, and the rest of us were using chainsaws to cut them down. After some hours of work, we decided to take a break. As we cooled off, we were walking among these uncut trees to see how many we had left. "Guys, come look at this!" Lawrence yelled to us. We quickly all gathered round to see what Lawrence found out. On one of the trees, there was a massive claw mark, and that wasn't all. The mark was covered in some sort of red liquid. It looked like blood. "Tom, what do you think of this? Maybe a bear or a wolf?" I asked. "Well, son, to be honest, I saw many wolf and bear claws in my time, but this one looks sorta new. I guess a bear could have made it, but it looks deeper than what I've seen. Bigger too." "And what do you make of that liquid? Is that—" I didn't manage to finish my sentence as Tom cut me off. "It's tree sap. Don't worry about it." I don't think Tom even believed that. It was blood. We all knew that. After that, we picked up the pace, trying to finish as soon as possible. And luckily, the rest of the day was uneventful. As the days went by, the sense of being watched grew stronger. We would hear twigs crack, see shadows move between trees, hearing howls in the distance, long and terrifying. It seemed more and more to us like we were being hunted. What I think was really the breaking point was the moment we started to find dead animals in the woods. Rabbits and squirrels, some wild boars and deer. They were mutilated, blood everywhere. But the worst were those claw marks, because they were identical to the ones we found on the tree, but deep in the flesh of animals. At that point, even Dean got serious and started to say that we needed to finish the job quick. On the 8th day, we were working late and the sun had already fallen down, but we were deep in the forest, marking measurements for the road, when we heard a scream. Sounded like old Tom. Sounded like he was in a lot of pain. He was yelling for help and screaming. We tried to find him, but it sounded like he was constantly changing locations, like he was being dragged. We were all running around in panicked circles, using flares and flashlights, hoping to spot him. But the only thing we heard were those pained screams. And suddenly, for a few moments, there was silence. "Tom!" Lawrence yelled. And then I heard the most blood-chilling sound in my life, like bones cracking. But not the normal way, like when you fall from a skateboard wrong. It sounded more like the noise when a dog eats and breaks bones. But there wasn't a dog out there. It was something else, chewing and breaking someone's bones. It took us a moment to put ourselves back together and call the police, but they just said that we needed to wait for the morning to start with the search. The next day, the police wanted to use some dogs to help them find old Tom by using the smell from one of his shirts. But the dogs were too scared to go into the woods. "They don't usually do that," one of the police officers said. Eventually, they did manage to calm the dogs down, and they entered the forest. It didn't take long for the dogs to find old Tom, or to be precise, what remained of him. They found old Tom and his clothes in pieces all over the place. We were dumbfounded. Tom's like a father to us, and now he was just dead. Dean was angry, swearing to kill the guy that did this. Local police and forest rangers kept assuring us that it was a bear attack, despite the clear evidence we kept giving them. In the end, we all decided that we would stay and finish the job we started. Not for us, but for old Tom. During the ride back from the forest, I began to talk with Jonathan. "So, those stories about werewolves, huh? What do you think about that now?" "To be honest," Jonathan started, "I was always pretty open-minded about stuff like that. Ain't there like millions of acres of forest in the world? Don't you think that somewhere there's some sort of mysterious thing?" I replied to him, "The only thing I'm sure of is we need to get this done, so we can leave." Talking with Jonathan about that caused me to think about werewolves a bit too much. Call me crazy, but I decided to take a silver knife to work with me, just to be sure. The next day was our last day in those woods. When the sun started to set, that's when the growling started. Lawrence quickly took charge and said that we were finished, and that we were leaving now. "Stay close and move fast, guys. If you see anything, yell. I brought a rifle just in case." We were practically running, my heart jumping around in my chest. Couldn't stop thinking of what happened to Tom, and I didn't want that to happen to me. Just as we reached the road where we parked our cars and trucks, there was a loud growling sound coming from behind us, then the snap of a broken stick. I turned around and saw him. Between the trees, a few yards away, something standing on two legs. I thought it was a person at first, but they were bigger, body much more muscular, and it only took a second to realize it was covered in fur and had a canine-shaped head. And I especially noticed the long arms with clawed hands. I stood stock still, just like the rest of the guys, until it ran towards us. I was still frozen in shock when Samuel slapped me in the face. "Come on, man, wake up! We need to go!" I quickly woke up from my trance, and we ran towards Samuel's car. But whatever that thing was faster. Something grabbed me by the leg I yelled in pain and fell, thinking, this is it. This is how I die. But then I remembered the silver knife I'd brought with me. In the blink of an eye, I pulled it out and stabbed at the thing. When it made contact, I heard a whimper, and the thing ran off back into the forest. Maybe I was in the clear, but before long I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, bandages on my leg, and in a heck of a lot of pain. A nurse said I was lucky to be alive, explaining that my leg had been deeply cut. I then asked what happened. Of course, I was told the bear had come back and attacked us. All I could say was, it wasn't a bear. And when she asked what I meant, I couldn't really explain. Because you don't go telling random people that you think a werewolf tried to kill you. We never did have to go back to that road. It was finished without any incidents by a different crew. But the people who did come to bring down the cement, I heard, said that they'd heard howls from time to time. This encounter truly changed my perception of the world and the mysteries that lie within it. Maybe the legends and tales we grew up with, and the ones we see in movies, are true. Because they'd have to come from somewhere. Night Shift in the Warehouse. From Ruby B. I used to work at a nursing home, and I experienced a lot of unexplained and paranormal activity in that place. I was there for 5 years, when I got a better job opportunity for better pay and benefits in a bigger town. Sad to leave my residence, I moved to a bigger city an hour away and began to work for a company that builds parts for cars. I moved up pretty quickly, and I made new friends. I was at my new job for about a year when I started to experience things here as well. At first, it was nothing major. Just seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, or hearing random noises, machines that would turn on with no one around, and even hearing my name called a few times. I was on the night shift, working 12 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. So my first thought was, I'm tired, and maybe I need some rest. Other than that, I love my job. I'm currently still here, and my boyfriend was out of the military and had even landed a job with me. So life was, and still is, pretty great. Anyway, the first year it was just these small things. But the second year of me being at this job, our company expanded, and the area I was working was getting moved to a new warehouse down the road. Besides my area, there was nothing else in this huge warehouse, and besides where I worked, no other lights would be turned on to save power. So imagine a big warehouse, and in one tiny corner there's light, and that's it. Everything else is pitch black and quiet. While working, my coworker and I will usually wear earbuds, listening to podcasts or music to help pass the time. So while we do talk some, mostly it's just us working and staying busy to meet our quota of parts by the deadline. One night we were shorthanded due to call-ins, so it was me, my boyfriend, and our forklift driver. We came in and started to look through the paperwork when my boyfriend told me he was going to run to the bathroom and the break room, which were right next to each other across the warehouse. It's like I said, completely dark on that side of the warehouse, and I could see him holding his flashlight on his phone up until he disappeared around the corner. That left me with our forklift driver. I'll call him B. B and I were talking about our weekend plans, a new game that was coming out, how his son was about to turn a year old. While showing me pictures of his son, we both heard walking behind us, and we turned at the same time to see this older man coming over. Now, it wasn't uncommon for someone from shipping to come over and ask questions, or to check our paperwork. But this guy we had never seen before. He wore the same shirt with the company logo, and was friendly, but he seemed lost. We asked if he needed any help finding anything, assuming he was a day shifter, as B would call them. But he smiled and told us, "No, I'll be on my way." He walked back to the bathrooms and break room, and we both just shrugged our shoulders and got to work. About 5 minutes later, my boyfriend came back with a handful of candy and 2 drinks from the vending machine. I smiled real big and told him thank you, and we kept working for the next 3 hours until it was break time. Together, we walked to the break room with B driving up on his forklift to join us, when I decided I was going to go to the bathroom real fast before sitting down. I walked into the bathroom and went to the stall closest to the door. That's when I heard talking. It was really soft, just a whisper really, but what scared me was that it sounded like a man. There are 4 stalls in this bathroom, and it was coming from the one on the very end. I didn't even sit down before running out and telling the guys what happened. Both B and my boyfriend ran into the women's bathroom, but didn't find anyone. I was almost in tears telling them I swear I heard it. We sat down for the break, and when it was time to go back, I didn't want to leave the well-lit room to walk back to my station in the dark. With a little coaxing, I walked back with my boyfriend. We worked for the next few hours with nothing unusual happening. Soon it was 3 a.m., lunchtime for us on night shift, and I had made some homemade stir-fry for us. We were both kind of excited to get to the break room to eat. Forgetting about earlier, I was walking next to my boyfriend when we heard footsteps behind us. Now, we assumed it was B. My boyfriend, wanting to startle him, spun around real fast, but no one was there. At about that time, his phone went off. It was a text from B, saying that he was going to go to the gas station, asking if we wanted anything. My breath caught, and my boyfriend grabbed my arm. Together, the 2 of us ran to the break room and slammed the door shut behind us. Now, this building is locked up tight, with only 2 doors, both of which you need a key card to get into. We knew that no one could get in without being seen. We called a supervisor from the main building and told him what was going on. He came straight to the warehouse to check things out. I should note, this man is 6'4" and 250 pounds, so if someone ran into him, it was more likely going to end with them being scared off or dragged out. And as a reminder, my boyfriend is ex-military too, and he went out to help our supervisor look, making sure nobody snuck in or was hiding. 5 minutes later, both of them and B, who had come back from the store, walked into the break room where I was sitting against the wall at a table so I could see the door. "Nobody's here, but I'll stay the rest of the night to make sure nothing happens with any of y'all here," said our supervisor. The rest of the night we heard footsteps in the dark outside our area, and at one point, even the supervisor was getting spooked. When the sun started to come up and light was coming in to light up the dark areas of the warehouse, we all started to settle down and get ready to go home. I finally felt safe enough to actually go pee, and practically ran to the bathroom, trying to hurry to get back so I wasn't alone. Once I was back to my area, my boyfriend and my supervisor both looked pale. B pulled up looking at me like, "What's wrong with them?" When my supervisor cleared his throat, he said with a thick German accent that last night on his way to work, John, one of our good friends and coworkers, had gotten killed in a car accident. He and his wife were driving home, and a drunk driver hit them, killing him on impact and sending his wife to the hospital. My jaw dropped. "What about their kids?" I asked, knowing they had 2 smaller children. But luckily, the children were not with them. As for the wife, it would be really touch and go. The wreck happened less than a mile from the warehouse on a back road where John and his wife lived. We later found out the drunk driver who hit them was a man that worked second shift for our company and was in shipping. When the article came out and we saw the pictures, I felt like the breath had been knocked out of me. There was the man we'd seen that night. The man who talked to us. He was the man who had killed John. The weird and scary part is this man also passed away on impact and somehow he had been there with us that night. I can't explain it, and part of me wonders if he knew what he had done. Or maybe he didn't realize he had died and was trying to find a phone. We have no idea. And to this day, I still work in that warehouse, but now we keep more lights on. Also, for those of you wondering, John's wife ended up living, and while she was in the ICU for a few weeks, she made a full recovery, and the kids are doing good as well. At the end of the day, I hope all the spirits found peace. My experiences with Aaron. From Strawberry Lover. I had just finished high school at the time of this story. It was summer and I needed to earn some money before going to university. So I worked a part-time job as a sales associate at a popular fashion store in the city center. It was a fun job, and I loved my coworkers. It was low stress and paid well, which was rare for my age. I arrived at work around 5 a.m. one day. We had a delivery, and I was working in unpacking stock and delivering it to the necessary departments. I was usually working on the women's floor, but in the summer I usually worked on whatever floor they needed me at most. I got to work, wheeling deliveries to the stockroom, joking with my coworkers about their sunny, bright dispositions this early in the morning. Not. Everyone had a consensus on early morning shifts, that they were the worst. However, I actually loved them, especially during the summer, because I would be done midday and could enjoy the amazing weather. As I was mid-joke, I accidentally bumped into someone. As I looked up to apologize, my heart sank. My manager came racing up to me and introduced the new hire that I would be training that day. Though I didn't need the introduction, I already knew who this boy was. Aaron. Aaron was a friend of a friend from high school. He joined our school 2 years back and immediately made himself known. He was confident, bubbly, and self-assured. Everyone loved him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I knew something was off with him. Despite my friends thinking I was just being judgmental, I swear I could see cracks in his shiny veneer of a good person. Something about the way he would look at someone when no one was watching him. His temper at the smallest issue. I was polite to him though, but I did keep my distance, never wanting to be alone with him. Thankfully, we didn't really cross paths a lot, beyond the first couple of months as a new kid at my school. As I stood facing him, he smiled at me. "Hey, it's so nice to see a familiar face. I was nervous." He reached out for a hug, but my grip tightened on the delivery cart. I smiled at him, wanting to keep that distance I cultivated during high school. "Oh my gosh, hi," I said. "So crazy to see you here." I told him to grab a box lying to the side of the corridor and follow me into the stockroom. We lumbered into the stockroom, which had boxes and boxes stacked on almost every table and corner available. My coworkers were hard at work unpacking and tagging the clothes in the boxes, only looking up when I introduced Aaron. They were friendly, but soon got to work. It was now my job to train him, a duty that should have been our manager's, but she was all too quick to hand off her duties to her subordinates, i.e. me. I soon got him started on the simplest of all stock, to ease him into it. I felt uneasy around him, but he was my responsibility now after all. Aaron started to unpack the shoes, tagging and placing them in racks to be moved upstairs in the men's department. At the same time, I was unpacking lingerie for the women's department, tagging and putting them on hangers. We fell into a steady rhythm, the clicking of the manual tagging device and the rustling of clothes becoming the background noise to our menial task. Eventually, once he was comfortable, I had him help me with the women's lingerie. I guess he felt more relaxed, as he happily started to chat to me and another coworker named Maggie. Our conversation was normal, beginning with casual talk about the weather and the state of public transport. We talked about university and how excited we were. Eventually, the talk turned towards our pets. I have this cat. a short-haired moggy called Georgie. Anyone who knows me knows I love talking about my cat. We raved about how cute our pets were, until Aaron, who was silent up until now, piped up. "I hate when my boyfriend's parrot acts up," he muttered with a curled lip. "She's so annoying, with the random noises she makes. Sometimes I just can't stand it. Wish I could just strangle her, but Brandon would absolutely hate me." He looked up from the stock on the table, smirking at us as if to relate to our pet woes. "See, sometimes when it comes to pets, you have to remember they're just stupid animals. And you have to, discipline them. Am I right?" He waved his arms around, laughing and smiling as if what he said made perfect sense. But the air had changed. His casual demeanor about abusing an innocent animal stunned me, and judging by the way Maggie tensed up, I could tell she had been stunned too. It was just the way he said it, with such utter rage and anger that you could feel it radiating off of him. Not gauging that the mood had changed, he kept muttering under his breath as he worked. I could hear occasional phrases such as, "stupid little thing," or "God knows that thing needs a muzzle," and other vitriol, while he smiled down at our work table. It sounds strange, but at the time, I truly did feel afraid of Aaron. That shift passed without incident, however, and we continued to work together for some time. It was almost the end of the summer season when it happened. I walked into the staff room around midday to begin my shift as usual, when I noticed my coworkers standing around, talking in low tones with shock on their faces. I put my bag in my locker and walked up to a group of them in the corner of the room, wanting to know the latest gossip. Little did I know it wasn't petty drama concerning our manager or a crazy customer story making the rounds. It was Aaron. Aaron had been arrested, and he was all over the news. My coworker Teresa, with creased brows and terror in her eyes, told me what happened. At the time, Aaron shared an apartment with his boyfriend Brandon, who was already attending university. We were all familiar with Brandon, as Aaron would brag about him at work, saying how romantic and caring he was. Teresa told me a couple of days ago, Aaron got home from his parents' house, and while Brandon was in the shower, his phone buzzed. Aaron checked Brandon's phone, and apparently, it was a Snapchat notification from another guy. I don't know exactly why he did it, but Aaron got angry. So angry, in fact, that he got a knife from the kitchen and stabbed Brandon multiple times. But that's not the shocking part. Aaron lived in that apartment for 2 whole days with Brandon's rotting body in their shower cubicle. He ate and slept in that apartment without so much of a care that the man he loved lay dead in their bathroom by his hand. What really chills me is that he even took the time to call out of work after murdering Brandon. Eventually, the police were called after a downstairs neighbor complained of a bad smell. It was summer after all. And when the police eventually entered the apartment, they not only found Aaron, and obviously Brandon, but they found their pet too, in her birdcage, having been strangled, like he said he wanted to. The poor parrot he hated so much had not been spared. I was horrified by the news, though I always had a hunch that Aaron was twisted. This was something I never wanted to be proven right about. I didn't ever expect him to do what he did, though some part of me wonders, was it foresight, or just some base-level human ability to feel evil the way I did that day in the stockroom? A little while later, I left that job and moved to my university town. Aaron was charged with murder and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. I truly hope that Brandon's soul rests in peace. As for me, I hope I never come across or work with a person as evil as Aaron ever again. Much of the time when we have stories about mysterious creatures or demonic things and other supernatural forms, they don't often tread into the territory of direct violence. especially not against people. But today's episode is different. If you believe in that Dogman killing someone story, even a little bit, then what a most terrifying idea that is. If I were you, I wouldn't go looking up La Bête du Gévaudan on Google, because if you think one werewolf-type creature killing one person is too much, well, I've got some news for you. Good night. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails. You can follow me on Twitter at DarkPrevails. I often do giveaways on various platforms, and that's one of them. Be sure to pre-order my new upcoming book, Creepy Campfire Stories, featuring the scariest stories you can possibly tell around a campfire for your friends. If you want them to be terrified, that is. Help me get to 2,500 pre-orders before July 8th, 2025 when it releases. And right now, if you're one of the first 100 verified pre-orders, you'll get an exclusive Darkness Prevails plushie. But you gotta pre-order, and you gotta verify that pre-order with the link in the description. Thank you. Well, it's time for me to clock out. Until next time, my friends, I'll be seeing you back at Dead and Roasted real soon.